the black flag of Islamic State, planted on a hilltop near the Syrian town of Kobane to show they had regained this key battleground. But moments later, this happened. A direct hit by an airstrike sends militants running down the hill. One was reportedly killed. This mountain overlooking Kobane has been fought over for weeks as both sides battle for control of this besieged border town. It was one of many airstrikes by coalition warplanes in and around Kobane, again and again hitting jihadi targets. This week, for the first time, Americans dropped weapons and supplies for Kurdish fighters here, and soon reinforcements are expected to join them. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan confirmed Iraqi Peshmerga fighters would travel across his country to join the battle in Kobane. An agreement on a figure of 200 fighters has been reached, he said. All this, the Americans say, has improved the situation on the ground, or at the very least, bought Kurdish fighters there more time. Across the border in Turkey, more than 130,000 Syrian refugees have fled their homes. Space here at the Surak refugee camp is limited, and some families are living in abandoned buildings. It's getting colder at night, especially for kids, this man says. Of course, I'm afraid of the winter, because we have nothing. For those who remain here, there is hope, but the overwhelming feeling is uncertainty. What is clear is what happens here has become crucial for both the Islamic State and its opponents. Laura Westbrook, BBC News.
The Islamic State group used Turkey as a corridor to approach Kobane from the north. Now, this theory was put forward by the Syrian government this morning. Turkey has flatly denied it. A foreign ministry spokesman called it nothing but lies. I think we should wait for hard evidence of it. And if there is evidence, such as photographs of ISIS fighters transiting Turkey, I'm sure that evidence will emerge because that region of the country supports the opposition. The Kurds are strong down there, and if they have such photographs, they will leak them to the press. The second theory, which has been advanced by a spokesman for the Syrian Kurdish fighters in the past few hours, is that the ISIS fighters attacked Kobane from the west, traveling in vehicles that were flying the flag of the Free Syrian Army, the moderate Western-backed rebel group in Syria, whom the Kurdish fighters regard as allies. And this theory is backed by the Turkish authorities across the border there, across the border from Kobane, who say that according to their information, ISIS approached Kobane town from the west.
And it's been a 4-month-long battle. Nearly 1,800 people have been killed. And whilst never being an important strategic target, it became a symbol of the fight against the Islamic State group. Now, though, Kurdish fighters have succeeded in driving the last Islamic State group fighters out of the Syrian town of Kobane. They've raised their flags over Kobane, dealing the jihadists an important blow after months and months of heavy fighting. In more good news across the border in Iraq, a top army officer announcing that troops had also liberated the whole of Diyala province from IS jihadists. A little earlier, I spoke to our correspondent in Ankara, Jasper Mortimer.
If you want to examine the significance of Kobane, you have to go back to mid-September when the battle began. ISIS was then on a roll. It had taken one town after the other across Iraq and Syria. So Kobane became an opportunity to stop the ISIS monster, a test of the world's willpower to stand up to the atrocities that ISIS had been committing. At the moment now in Kobane, it's quite clear that the Kurds have won, but ISIS still controls the surrounding villages. In a sense, Kobane is an island in an ISIS sea. Fortunately for the town, on the northern side of it is Turkey, and Turkey will become a lifeline in reconstructing Kobane. I think another significance is militarily. it was a successful combination of local ground forces and US air power. Whenever the Kurdish fighters fighting ISIS got into trouble, they called in the US Air Force. And I think the Pentagon will be looking at where this formula of closely coordinated local forces and air power can be applied elsewhere in Iraq and Syria.
So, Jasper, where does this leave then the Islamic State group now?
Well, ISIS has strengths and weaknesses. Economically, it's rich. It controls oil fields in Iraq and Syria. And if you've got money, you can recruit. Politically, it's weak. If there were elections tomorrow, ISIS would not be able to translate its firepower into votes. It depends on its military force, and militarily it still controls large swathes of Iraq and Syria. And the last few months has shown that it's only the Kurdish forces that can roll ISIS back. But the Kurds are only in the north of Syria and the north of Iraq. You can't expect Kurds to drive ISIS out of the whole of Syria and Iraq. For that, you've got to strengthen the Iraqi army. You've got to strengthen the moderate Syrian forces. And experts say that is a long way off.
Every street, every inch of Kobane is testament to the apocalypse that the Islamic State brought here. For 4 months they faced each other, sometimes just yards apart, and there are still plenty of dangers here. Unexploded mortars, booby traps, but IS is gone. It's the Kurds who are left standing, with trophies from the fight. This fighter tells me IS used car bombs packed with explosives to target our checkpoints. These men are weary. Their victory came unexpectedly, and the outcome is a shock. The Islamic State, here at least, has been beaten. Most of its people fled Kobane. Those who stayed draped curtains across the roads to hide out of sight from IS snipers. I met one of the families who refused to leave. Hello. Hello. Rahima and her 12 children and grandchildren stayed throughout the worst of the fighting.
We faced difficulties. We were hungry, we were thirsty, but we are no different from the fighters. They stayed and we stayed. We were in the basement. When they had food, they shared it with us. It was hard, but thank God we knew we would win.
Those who haven't seen the evil that took place here will see it now. Kurdish officials didn't abandon us. We are going to school now, and we are very happy because we will be able to go back to our villages. They liberated our lands.
In the ruins, IS fighters left behind messages. This one from a sniper makes a promise to the town of bloodshed, beheadings and destruction. Kobane is now at peace. The streets, or what's left of them, are now silent, but driving the Islamic State from here came at tremendous cost. Hundreds of coalition airstrikes, which have flattened most of the town. And the Islamic State didn't go far. They're less than 5 miles from here. So while Kobane has been liberated, the fight against the militants goes on. We headed east, closer to the front lines. Here, the Kurdish fighters are young and they're determined. But still, on 3 sides, they're surrounded by the Islamic State. In the war against the Islamic State, the battle for Kobane will be remembered. These streets tell that with foreign help, IS can be defeated, but only at great sacrifice. Quentin Somerville, BBC News, Kobane in Syria.